Hello and welcome to the Love of the Star podcast. It is draft week, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to party. Brian Broaddus in the building, the Super Bowl winning scout. I'm Eric Chiafalo of the G-Bag Nation on 105.3 The Fan, weekdays 2 to 7. And it is great to have you in now that we are now rapidly approaching draft night and round one, Thursday night. It is here, Green Bay, Wisconsin, the place where Brian Broaddus won his Super Bowl championship. It all culminates with the first ever Green Bay installment of the draft. So this is very exciting. Broaddus, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. Just been a busy morning trying to kind of figure out what's going to happen in front of the Dallas Cowboys to get a little bit better idea what players might be available to them. It's an interesting journey so far from the things. I think that the more I dig into this, the more uncertainty I really do have for the Cowboys at 12. And is Ted McMillan going to be there? That's a big question we're dealing with right now. Is there a possibility where they pass on Ted McMillan and go in another direction? Starting to hear some of that stuff. There's just a lot going on with this organization, and potentially what could happen ahead of them. But also when they get on the clock, what in fact they will do. So getting updated medical information on some guys, trying to kind of figure that out. Will that make guys drop? A lot going on here, basically a day out from the NFL draft.
Yeah, I know you've been working the phones trying to get a gauge from around the league of what teams' plans are and who may or may not be available. So there's plenty to flesh out here as it pertains to the top 10 and then where that leaves the Cowboys at 12. So you are less sure right now than maybe you were in previous days, because it felt like this whole thing was coming to a wide receiver, Ted McMillan, Matthew Golden. That seems to be the two main names, but you could throw Ibuka in there, whatever. It seemed like wide receiver was the position that they were wanting to strike on, but is that something that's now becoming more and more?
Yeah, I think it's. I think that they very well could. The whole thing with McMillan could very well happen. The thing that I'm starting to hear more and more and more as we get closer is, though, that the situation, like I say, if McMillan was to be off the board, now where they go? Is it we've heard a bunch about Golden, getting word that Ibuka is higher on their board. Maybe that's, something they have to absolutely think about. Got an updated medical report on Will Johnson. Everything seems to be okay. There's some things that maybe you'll have to deal with in the future there. Does that make him off Dallas's board or anybody else's board? There's teams that are worried about his medical stuff. But I think that if McMillan is not there, they're open to taking Booker at guard. I think what I find really interesting is Peter Schrager, who I have a lot of respect for. And Peter does one mock draft a year, and it's the very last one. It's usually the day before the draft. And the way, if you look at Peter Schrager's mock draft, he's got the Cowboys passing on Ted McMillan, and he's got him taking a offensive lineman, Tyler Booker from Alabama at guard. And that's with McMillan being on the board. So there's a lot of people that believe that this morning being on the phone with folks, they believe that Schrager's top 10 is accurate. They think that's the way things might go. So McMillan was on the board, but Schrager had the Cowboys passing on McMillan and going with the offensive lineman with Booker, who was a 30-visit guy for them. Now, again, Peter Schrager, I think Peter myself is really, really good. I know that if it doesn't work out this way, people are going to rip it and say, oh, Peter Schrager doesn't know what the F he's talking about. I think he's a very, very connected guy. There's a lot of guys around the league and gals that believe that his top 10 could be very, very accurate in this draft. So it's his only one. It's the one you kind of, but I think the Cowboys are open to, I think they're open to taking a Will Johnson. I know I mocked him yesterday. You were not with us at 105.3 The Fan. We kind of talked about, possibilities. other possibilities. I mentioned I did it with DallasCowboys.com too, with taking Will Johnson with no Tet McMillan on the board for them. So Booker, Will Johnson, Jane Slater's throwing out names like Walter Nolan. I don't think this is smokescreen stuff, and maybe this is one of those things where legitimately they're going to have options when they select. I just don't think it's as cut and dry as saying it's Tet McMillan. Let's go to work.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, I got the Schrager mock pulled up right now, and he does have one trade with Indy coming up from 14 to 10 to go get the Michigan tight end. Colston Loveland, but man, so this has Genty going 5, which you've been on now for the last week or so. Brought us. Everybody was thinking it was going to be Mason Graham going 5 to the Jags, but Ashton Genty, his name has started to make an appearance. It seems like I think one of your lines was that the Jaguars want touchdowns. And
they want touchdowns.
So is that Genty? Is that maybe one of the wide receivers? But it feels like that's Genty. And so he goes off the board even a touch sooner than most people had predicted throughout this process. And then that pushes guys down like a Tet McMillan. So you feel like there is a chance that McMillan is there at 12 and they would pass on him for a guard? Because I mean, their presser yesterday, the Cowboys presser, pre-draft presser, it was a lot of the takeaways were that, man, offensive line is definitely in play. Offensive line's definitely in play for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to me that, and listen, folks, I'm not coming on here talking about, they're definitely going to. I'm just saying there are going to be some options there. There's been things that in this draft that we've been, it's McMillan, it's McMillan, it's McMillan. I think that they're more open than we're thinking right now. I really, really do. And what's interesting about Schrager's draft is that he has Mason Graham going past the Cowboys to the Dolphins at 13. If you put Mason Graham on that board, where does he fit? Could this be the one time where Dallas is looking at it and going, whoa, wait a minute, what just happened here? Is this the CeeDee Lamb break, that they got several years ago? A guy like Mason Graham, a defensive tackle, can play the 1, can play the 3. Could you pass on that kind of talent over Booker or over McMillan or, any of these other guys? Their stack is going to be, I think it's going to be fascinating, because I think the gaps between some of the guys that we're thinking, like a McMillan and like a Golden, I think that that in between group is really, really pretty deep, and it's filled with names that we might not have been talking about through the draft season. But you give them the opportunity to take Mason Graham and to look at Booker and to look at Will Johnson and to look at McMillan, then that presents a different kind of avenue for them to go through.
And now the Woolly Bully has arrived, ladies and gentlemen. It must be draft week. You couldn't keep Wolchuk away from the mics, as we are now just a touch over 24 hours from the NFL draft. Wolchuk, how are you feeling, my friend?
Man, I'm pumped, guys. I'm sorry if the audio isn't quite as good as we need it to be here. I left the mic at home, so I came into the morning show with us on 105.3 The Fan, and that was a flub on my part. But I'm pumped. I mean, this is awesome. The draft rumors are swirling. I know you guys have been talking about some options there at 12. It seems like everybody's got a different idea of what the Cowboys could be doing at pick 12 right now.
Zach, what we're going back through, Peter Schrager put out his only mock draft this morning, and he had Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama, being selected. People around the league that I've talked to this morning feel like that Schrager has maybe the top 10 right. That means when you came on board, we were talking with Mason Graham was a possibility there. McMillan was still on the board. Got some medical information about Will Johnson this morning. Just a kind of, as you said, a lot of options there. I don't know how they maybe would pass on Mason Graham being the defensive tackle. Maybe that's something, maybe they feel that, we've been hammering McMillan, Golden, McMillan, all this throughout. maybe they're about to do something that we really didn't really talk that much about.
The Booker thing would be shocking over the two players that you mentioned with Mason Graham and Teteroa McMillan. I mean, I've got McMillan and Graham both as top 5 players in this draft class. I would not be passing on either of those for Tyler Booker. And I like Tyler Booker. He's a plug-and-play right guard. He's a mauler. He's mean. He's nasty. But Mason Graham, and I get it, there's some PTSD when it comes to Michigan defensive linemen, maybe just Michigan picks in general with this fan base. But Mason Graham is very different to what you had with a Taco Charlton and especially a Mozzie Smith. I mean, this guy is wide. He's thick as a bowl of oatmeal, which was a phrase I used for Cooper Beebe last year. But his ability to get upfield and be disruptive, it's very reminiscent to a Braden Fisk, who was a guy that came out of Florida State last year, was a high second-round pick, but he's much better against the run than what Braden Fisk was. So Mason Graham is the type of player at defensive tackle that this team has not had since I don't know when. I mean, you might be going back to your days with Leroy Glover. That's how I mean, he is a rare cat, but Teteroa McMillan, I just think, like, to me, that's a home run selection. If he's there at 12 as well, passing on either of those two, I think, would be foolish. It's got to be one of those two picks if they're sitting there in Schrager's mock scenario.
Well, fellas, how does Mason Graham fit in this defense next to Osa? Are they similar players? Are they different players? Is that your Mozzie replacement if you're drafting Mason Graham? How does that all work out, Broadus?
Yeah, I think that, to me, I've looked at Mason Graham as really as kind of a 3-technique guy. He was well over 300 pounds when he played at Michigan, and then he got to the combine and he lost a ton of weight to try and maybe better himself with some of the things. There were a lot of questions about his ability. How would he test going to the combine? So he lost a lot of weight getting ready for the combine. Can he put that weight back on? But there's people that will say, well, he could play the 1, he could play the 3. I wouldn't doubt that with this guy. This is a disruptive type of a player, but I think his better position might be, I wonder if he, in fact, is going to keep the weight off and then try and just play as a 3 technique. But Dallas clearly in the mix for a 1 technique type of a player. But that would be one of those. If they passed on a Mason Graham, it might feel like, well, listen, we feel good with Mozzie as the 3. Excuse me, not Mozzie, Osa as the 3, and we'll go and take Booker or McMillan or Johnson or one of these other guys.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out. I mean, would that be a reason why they pass on Mason Graham? Is because, hey, we just gave the money to Osa, and they're kind of if
they're thinking about him as a 3, if in fact that he is going to bulk back up and play more 1, then it's a great fit. But okay. You're looking at him. I think a lot of people have evaluated him. I have him as a 3 on my board. I don't know, Zach. I don't want to speak for you on this behalf.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's kind of interchangeable. I think he definitely has the ability to play the 1 tech because he is so stout. He's got a great anchor. He's tough to move off the ball, but he is slippery. I mean, he can kick inside and play the 3. I think that he is a player that you could pair with Osa Odighizuwa if you wanted to play him at the 1 tech, and you do have 2 guys that can really get upfield and rush.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. All right, you're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast. You can find it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, fellas, the Cowboys had their pre-draft presser. And one of the things that stood out to me, and Broadus, I would love your thoughts on this, the idea that they don't have their board completely together and ready to rock and roll just 48 hours before the draft. How uncommon is that?
Well, every team is different. And I know for the times that I did work with Jerry Jones, the week of the combine, the board, the finishing touches might have been put on it the weekend prior, maybe that Saturday, Sunday, we got the board taken care of. So when we woke up Monday morning and went in, it was kind of talking about making calls, finding out where the players were going to be on draft day, making sure phone numbers were good. I got on the phone, started calling all the other NFL teams and talking to their guys about possible trades, anything that we could do. So it was kind of, as they say, the hay was in the barn at that point. The one thing that they could be the board not being complete is they might be trying to figure out some guy like Benjamin Morrison, who Notre Dame, who they worked out yesterday. Could this be they were waiting for that last piece of him working out? He had the the hip surgery. His workout was a lot later. He got cleared a lot later. So maybe their board was not complete on a couple of medical things that they were maybe looking at. But it seems to me very, very rare from teams in the past, unless the Joneses had a conflicting scheduling that pushed them back a couple of days where it made this go a little bit later than normal.
Was there, Walchuk, was there anything from the presser that stood out to you in terms of the way they're going about things right now? And could you get a read on kind of what they're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it sounds like running back's just not in an option there at 12. Like maybe if they end up moving back, maybe then it comes into play. But the whole Marion Hampton buzz that I know Kuiper was hot on early on, that just doesn't seem like that's a reality at all. I do think offensive line is definitely in play. It was kind of interesting them talking about offensive line and really how that benefits the run game. And then they kind of doubled down with the Zeke contract, a few years ago. I thought that was a little bit – it didn't really make sense, so a little bit contradicting there. But, yeah, I think that was the main takeaway. I think really everything is on the table in the first round except for running back, and I do think they would really love to move back if the opportunity presents itself.
Eric, and speaking of moving back, I think the thing that we learned, and we've been talking about this on our various platforms that we've been on, and even our show on 105.3 The Fan, is that Jerry Jones was adamant yesterday about not picking up the phone and calling somebody. So, if you're our buddy Jeff Kavanaugh, captain trade back type of player here, that's what you want to do. Jerry Jones is not going to initiate that conversation of going back. He's in the situation, and I've been in that room with him, and I've seen it. I've seen him wait for the phone to ring, and the phone hadn't rung. And they're not interested in picking up the phone and calling the Denver Broncos at 20 or anybody else behind them. They're going to let those teams come up to them. And, we'll see how that all plays out. But if you want the Dallas Cowboys to trade back, you better hope that somebody behind them wants to be part of that, get that 12th pick. Because Jerry was very adamant about that. And we've known that. I've known that through him throughout. And that's why I brought it up even before he said it. Trading back for the Dallas Cowboys is not an option unless they're initiating unless the call is initiated by another team. Period. That's the way it's going to run.
How common would you say that strategy is in different war rooms that you've been in over the years?
They don't want to see. The whole idea is, and this is like the things that I used to do. I used to call teams ahead of time and say, listen, we're open for business. If you want to come up to us, give us a call. Stephen will field calls. We've seen it when we go to war room camp. Stephen will talk. He'll say thank you. He'll put the phone down. He'll announce to the room what the trade was. Jerry will look around. They'll say, no, not good enough. If it is something that they absolutely like, Stephen will stay on the phone, or he might quickly call back and say, yeah, let's do this. We got a deal. So that's the kind of reaction. But like I said, it's not the most common thing. Jerry and Stephen are businessmen first and foremost. They look at it as a sign of weakness by picking up the phone first. They look at it as a strength, as what we'd say winning the deal. If in fact that they get somebody, they could get Sean Payton to call them, go from 20 to 12, and we've talked about pick 51, which is an overpay by the Broncos. It's part of doing business, though. If you want that 12th pick, the Joneses look at it that way. If they call Denver and Denver says, "Yeah, we'll take the pick, but we'll give you our 3." Well, when they probably could have got the pick 51. They look at that as a sign of weakness there. So to me, if you're a Cowboy fan and you want them to captain trade down rides again, you better hope somebody behind them makes those calls.
Walchuk, how does it land with you when I read you this Jane Slater report? She says, where are the Cowboys leaning this year? Here are 3 names I'm hearing and to keep an eye on. Ole Miss defensive tackle Walter Nolan, Tennessee edge James Pierce, and Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
2 out of the 3 names terrify me. I can totally understand the thinking of Nolan and Pierce. Walter Nolan is just frustrating to me because that's a player that I think should be wrecking games with the talent that he has. Because there are moments where you see it. I mean, physically, he's exactly what you want. He can be explosive off the snap. He is a guy that can really wreak havoc on both, like not only stopping the run, but specifically pushing the pocket and rushing the passer. It's just hot and cold with him. And some of the stuff that I had heard specifically, and I get it, it could be like a scorned ex-lover because he transferred from Texas A&M. But the feedback from College Station on Walter Nolan was not very good. And, that's a player where I totally understand a team that falls in love with the traits and says, hey, let's get him in our building, and we're going to find a way to get this guy to play consistent. And he's got enough tools that we can work with there. But he does scare the crap out of me to take him at 12. Pierce is a guy that has rare bends. The first step quickness is there. He is one of the best pass rushers, period, in this class. I think him, Carter, Mike Green would probably be the top three guys for me. I just worry about him being a little bit too light and getting pushed around when it comes to the running game. And you already have Micah Parsons, who we do talk about, setting the edge. I think if you've got two guys there in Micah and James Pierce Jr., you might just get bullied off the ball in the running game. That's my fear with James Pierce Jr. Golden, hey, he's been the sexy name with the Cowboys here at 12. I've talked with Brian about this plenty on the draft show and on our show on 105.3 The Fan. I'm an advocate for Emeka Egbuka. I've got Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State, higher than Matthew Golden. I think he's one of the safest players in the entire class. The route running, the dirty work that he does, I don't think he's getting enough credit for what he can do after the catch in terms of being an explosive playmaker. I would just lean Egbuka, but out of those three names, Golden, hey, I get it. I'm okay there. The other two do make me really, really nervous, but I can understand the thought process why teams would like those players.
Yeah, and then once again, we go back to Peter Schrager's mock draft, the last one he did, which is his only one. He had Walter Nolan going to San Francisco at 11. So, that would take him away from you if it fell that way. But yeah, I think Wolchuk has absolutely nailed all three of the guys. There's word that they like Egbuka better than Golden on their board. So if that's the case, if it came down to those two, if their stack reflects that, then Egbuka should be the pick.
And then Jane added, Wolchuk, you mentioned it looks like the Cowboys are pretty against taking a running back at 12. And I think we're all pretty okay with that unless Genty was there. But she notes that she very much believes they're going to be going running back in round 2. And she said Tootin, running back from Virginia Tech, would be someone worth keeping an eye on. Now, is that a guy that would be worth it in round 2? And the idea of them going running back in round 2, does that seem like it makes the most sense to you guys?
I think that if you had to, the running back, I think the running back, real quick, Zach, I think the running back has to be taken sometime by the end of the third round. I'm not totally interested. I think it's a deep draft at running back. Don't get me wrong. I do think the quality of the running back at the second round and the third round is better than it is in the fourth and fifth round. But Tootin, you talk about explosive runs, you talk about a finisher, very limited passing tree. There's, not to say he can't catch the ball, but you don't see him. It's not like some of these other backs that you see, like the Hendersons and other, where they throw him the football and you see positive gains. Virginia Tech's offense, very, very behind the times when it came to throwing the ball to the running backs. So there's some things like that with Tootin. But you talk about explosive runs. This guy was one of the best in the country. So I do feel like that they have to address the running back situation, second round, third round. But I would be interested to see if they don't take a corner, say they don't take Will Johnson, I would be interested to see what corner is on that board. And is that corner better than a running back at 44? That's where I think the discussions, maybe even the defensive tackle, needs to be had at that spot as well.
Wolchuk, would Tootin make sense to you in round 2?
Not in round 2. I think the third round is where I've got Tootin. I think the second round would be a little bit rich for me. And I agree with Brian. I think you might end up just being in a situation where how this thing, and if there's a run, you've got to take a corner in the second if you want to have a guy that you feel really good about that could probably play immediately. So, I mean, you've got we talk about guys like Trey Amos for the corner from Ole Miss, Maxwell Harrison, the corner from Kentucky. Maybe you get lucky and a Ravel from East Carolina like slides down the board for you due to injury concerns, but you might end up just needing to snag your corner at 44 for risk of being wiped out. Like Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State, I think could be a really good slot corner. They could take him in the third if they wanted to go running back. But Tootin I like a lot. He's an electrifying runner, really good production there at Virginia Tech. And he's a guy that consistently makes the first man miss. I mean, if you're looking at some juice, Tootin is that guy, and for a smaller back, he runs strong in between the tackles. But I think at 76, I'd be looking at him over 44.
Okay, very good. Now, the other thing, too, that happened yesterday was Stefon Gilmore made an appearance at the Star. It seems like it was much to do about nothing, but I don't know if I can fully believe that either. The 34-year-old now corner was with the Cowboys, and then now he's still a free agent. Broadus, is there anything to Stefon Gilmore at this point?
Yeah, I think if Stefon Gilmore was visiting the Cowboys on an official visit, he wouldn't walk through the front door of the building. There's player entrance. He was here. He knows where the player entrance is. He knows where where he needs to be for the locker room, the training staff, and all that. I don't think he would park in the front of the building and walk through the way he did. I think this was more maybe he had some business in the building. Maybe he was there seeing somebody. There's several businesses that are in the building. I just don't feel like that they would parade if they were interested. If he would go parading by that media room, which is all in glass, where they could see everybody walking in and out of that building. I think they would take him through the player entrance if it was an official visit, and that he would park over in the garage and not park out front. So I think this is right now. I would think maybe he wanted to come by and see maybe Steven and Jerry and just say hello, kind of a thing. But I think this was more about just him having business over there and not being football business at this point.
And they were talking about at their presser yesterday some trade. You know, they always like to speak into existence that they're working the phones and maybe making some trades in terms of actual players in the league right now. Anything of that in terms of the position or a player that you think they might be going after here? And would this be like a big swing? Is this like an Amari Cooper trade, or is this a Jonathan Mingo trade?
I think this is more. I think that there's the names that I heard, and I'm trying to pull up my list of guys that I had on that list. But yeah, there's it's actually the names that I was hearing that people are talking about. As far as when it comes to this is gang of 7 guys, and I know around the league that monitor this stuff. When they started talking about significant names, these were the names that I was told that were on the market right now that are fits for the Cowboys. Jair Alexander, Green Bay, Jalen Ramsey from the Dolphins, Travis Etienne was talked about, Rashidi White, Tampa Bay, and then George Pickens from Pittsburgh, and then also Jamison Williams from the Detroit Lions. Those are all names that are significant names that if you were talking about adding players that could be a fit for the Dallas Cowboys, that's the group my gang of 7 was talking about if Dallas was interested in maybe pursuing and maybe making a call. I did learn that I asked about Williams from Detroit. What would it take to get him? I was told a 3rd-round pick would likely be the asking price there. So if you're the Cowboys and you don't want to take McMillan at 12 and you want to take something else and you want to take a running back at 44 and you want to trade for a wide receiver with your 3rd-round pick, those are avenues that you could absolutely go through.
Those are some interesting names. Walchuk, any of those names that excite you?
Well, Williams certainly would be at the top of the list along with Jalen Ramsey. I mean, we talked – I'm kind of calling BS on this one. I think, Brian, you laid it out perfectly. Like, this is kind of the way that it would have to fall. If they don't go wide receiver at 12, let's say McMillan's gone, and then there's a split room on Igbuka and Golden, and they say, like, you know what, we love Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan, or whoever the other player is.
Booker, so right.
And so they don't take a wide receiver. And then the second round comes and goes, and they go defensive tackle, or they go running back, or they take a corner there if they don't take a corner. But they still haven't taken a receiver. That's when I think you could get that in the third. That makes sense. I mean, Jameson Williams is a former first-round pick. I would assume if they're doing that, they had a high grade on him. He adds speed to where they lack right now on offense. The thing that just doesn't make sense is he's on the last year of his rookie deal. So you're going to have to work out a contract extension with Jameson Williams while you still have to get Deron Bland figured out, Tyler Smith figured out, Micah Parsons figured out. Do you end up wanting to bring back Jake Ferguson? Like, there's a lot of other guys here that you're already going to have to pay, and the Cowboys are more of the draft and develop and keep your own. So I don't know that it makes a ton of sense unless it's maybe a day 3 type pick and they're really just winning the trade, which is kind of how they likes to do that stuff. Ramsey would be a lot of fun. The other names for me, I'm not trading for a running back in this class. I would that's one where it's like, this is a tremendous running back draft. I'm not giving up a pick. I'm going to draft a guy. The corner and the wide receiver, I can understand it, but I'm not taking a runner. And honestly, I want to stay the hell away from George Pickens. The player's an incredible talent, but every game, every week, it seems like there's something going on with George Pickens. And for Brian Schottenheimer that talks about culture, and I mean, it's almost kind of like the right kind of guy that Jason Garrett used to do. I don't know that George Pickens is really the type of personality that fits that.
Yeah, and we've seen the track record of these combustible personalities. They can be contained to some extent with Mike Tomlin, who's like the best babysitter in the sport. And as soon as they go somewhere else, everything just completely blows up with those individuals. So I'm with you 100% on that. All right, let's get to the mailbag. You're listening to the Love of the Star podcast. Love of the Star is an Odyssey podcast, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts, especially on the Odyssey app. Okay, now let's go ahead and get into the Dean Julia mailbag, ladies and gentlemen. First question brought us from Johnny Utah on the Twitter. Which potential top 10 player do you see most likely sliding to the Cowboys at 12?
Top 10 as far as on,
I guess,
their board or my board. I don't. I mean, okay. If for example. That's an interesting. Zach, I mean, you got somebody you think
Mason Graham, slide? Right? It's Mason Graham.
I would say Mason Graham. I don't think Mason Graham's going to slide. I don't. I know Peter Schrager has him sliding. I don't think he will. I think he ends up somewhere at 6 maybe. But if he were to get past 6, well, maybe there's a slide. But I kind of feel like that he's going to be a top maybe 8 player. So I don't know, but yeah, I mean, that one, we talked about that to start the show. I don't know how realistic that is. I know I'm talking about Peter Schrager and what the respect I have for him, but I like I said, I don't know if that one's actually going to happen. So I don't know if there's any. Could people think something about the quarterbacks? Do people think that? Yeah. With Sanders, I mean, would that surprise you if he got past the Browns, he got past the Giants, he got past the Raiders, he got past? Is that considered? I mean, I just kind of have a feeling that this thing, I have a feeling where it's going to start getting crazy is kind of like that. I don't know. It could be Jackson. If Jacksonville takes Genty, then now you're going to start to see, okay, where's everybody going to go? Where see how everybody kind of has their board. But I don't know if there's going to be a slide. Schrager thinks the slide's going to be Mason Graham. I don't know if I'd necessarily agree with that.
Yeah, I guess it's really like, what do the Raiders do? If Genty goes to the Jags, then what happens with the Raiders pick? Do they take Teteroa McMillan? Do they take Mason Graham? Do they go offensive line and take Armin Membu at a Mizzou? That's what then could end up pushing some guys like a Mason Graham. Then I can see the Mason Graham slide if Vegas were to pass on him. Right. I don't think the Jets would take him. It sounds like Carolina's pretty in on Jalen Walker, but maybe that's a smoke screen. I don't know about New Orleans. Would they end up taking him there?
They're having an argument right now. Yeah, right now in New Orleans, they're having an argument about there's Kellen Moore. The word is Kellen Moore wants offense. Kellen Moore wants offensive. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess Mason Graham would be the one guy that, but it's going to have to get past. It's going to have to get past the Raiders there. I just think it's, I would be surprised if it happened, but maybe Peter Schrager has this thing right.
And many questions coming in, just wanting y'all's prediction for what would be your best guess at 12 if you had to guess right now, a day out of round one. If you had to guess who would be that, the odds still say it's going to be a wide receiver. Like FanDuel has the favorite being one of the wide receivers, just in terms of position. But if you had to just guess right now, what would be your prediction?
I'm going to say it's going to still be McMillan. But if McMillan ends up with the Raiders or the Saints, one of those things, then, man, all bets are off. It could be a guard. It could be a corner. It could be a defensive tackle. There's a lot of different ways that they could go. I want to say I'll stick with, I know we did a mock draft yesterday on the draft show, 3-rounder, McMillan being gone, thinking he was gone. I took Will Johnson. I did what I think they would do, not what I would do. I did what I think they would do. And if the medical report is not terrible, which I don't think it is on Will Johnson, even though some teams have some concerns about that, I kind of feel like that maybe he would be in consideration. But don't discount Booker there. And, Jane Slater might be right about the Walter Nolan stuff if, in fact, he gets past San Francisco at 11. But if McMillan's on the board, I would like to believe that it would take McMillan. If he's not, this thing could go 3 or 4 different ways.
I'm with you. I'm going to stick with McMillan. I'm just going to pray that the draft gods smile on him and he makes it there at 12. I think he's the pick if he's on the board, and he's the guy that I'd like. I'd like Igbuka if it's not McMillan. But if McMillan's gone, the gut feeling that I've had, like going back since December, is it's Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle out of Ole Miss. And Will Johnson makes a ton of sense. I agree with you there, Brian. But I know that they like Walter Nolan. And if he's able to make it past San Francisco, maybe he just ends up being their guy.
The question, Eric, is going to be in their stack, who is higher between Johnson, Booker, and Walter Nolan? That's going to be because the gut feeling now is they've got McMillan, and then there is players, as we were talking about earlier, between those wide receivers. I don't think it's tags touching for those guys. I think there is a gap between those guys, and how does their stack going to reflect? Johnson, Booker, Nolan, those all could, and if somehow Walker got through,
sure,
that would be something that you would have to also consider.
Okay, well, this is the fun stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Broadus. Thank you, Walchuk. And we will be back probably Friday morning, right? I mean, we got to get a Friday pod after the round 1 draft, looking ahead to round 2 as well. So we'll be inundating you with Love of the Star content, Cowboys and draft content. Thank you to all the great questions in the Dean Julia mailbag, and we'll see you here in a couple of days. Happy drafting, ladies and gentlemen.